Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sunday's edition of Weekend Waypoints for SEC Extra at D1Baseball.com. I'm Joe Healy, and I'm going to guide you through all of Saturday's action in a jam-packed day around the SEC, and then look a little bit ahead to Sunday and what we have on deck for the last day of the weekend. Let's take a look at, as I've got the scoreboard pulled up here. Like I said, busy day. I mean, the weather was a lot better around the footprint. So you got a lot of games in. There were some double headers, two double headers to be exact. So just a lot of action. Started early with the first wave of games. Vanderbilt taking down Houston at Minute Maid Park. That was a big one there. Kentucky really put it on Lipscomb. That was something that happened early in the day. A couple of other highlights. Missouri, after scoring one run the previous day in a loss to Northern Kentucky, scored 28 runs against Northern Kentucky, including 14 in the first inning. So again, consider the competition, but this is a situation where they scored one run the night before in the same team. They scored 28 the next day. So progress, I guess, is what you call that. So impressive stuff there for Missouri, even against an opponent that you would expect them to handle. How about Georgia and Georgia Tech playing a 3-1 game? Two very offense-oriented teams, programs right now, especially Georgia Tech. But teams pitched well, and you end up with a 3-1 game. So impressive stuff there. Good win for Georgia. Miami evens a series with Florida. That's going to be a big rubber game today. And then some close games. Obviously, LSU and Louisiana. Louisiana got a ninth inning home run to pull that game within one, but LSU pulls it out there in the end. Well played game. Well played game there. And that was one of those games that LSU more or less led from wire to wire. Louisiana got basically two big swings, two home runs that accounted for all four of their runs. And so it was a close game. The Cajuns were one swing away from tying it or taking a lead in that game, but it did feel like LSU was in control of that game throughout a lot of it. You like what you saw from Gage Jump as he continues to get stretched out. I mean, I've said this before on this show, on Highway to Hoover. I do radio in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and I've always said we're just going to have to – Gage Jump might look good in his outings, but we're going to have to be patient with getting him stretched out, getting him to his final form, whatever that is, just because there's so much rust on the body, right? And so but a good outing nonetheless for Gage Jump as he continues to get a little bit stretched out there. Hello to Jeremy Scott, who often comes in on this on Facebook. He drops in his usual Roll Tide. We will talk more about Alabama a little bit later in the show. They've got a big one today, and then Jason Armstrong, I believe, comparing 2024 LSU to 2023 LSU, and a comment on X. And they're different teams. I think the ceilings are high again. LSU will compete to win a national title. That's my thoughts on it. That's not a hot take either. We have them ranked where they are for a reason. It's just going to be a different team. They're just going to have to do it differently. And that's not good, better or worse. It just is. But it's going to have to be a team that gets led by its pitching. I like the offensive pieces. How could you not love what Tommy White brings to the table? Jared Jones, it feels like, is having a breakout season as a middle of the order bat. Paxton Kling has done some nice things. So we can go down the line, and there's nice offensive pieces, but this just isn't last year's lineup. That's just the reality of the situation. But also, this pitching staff is not last year's pitching staff. This group is better. So as long as it stays healthy, you feel like, hey, this is a group that could be led by its pitching staff. So the ceiling is just as high as last year. It's just different. I think that's just the reality of it. So let's talk about the game of the day. And it was actually the game I was at. It is Clemson 5, South Carolina 4. Obviously, the SEC team came on the wrong end of this one, but that does not obscure the fact that it was an absolutely outstanding game, as I will flip over to the box score for this one. There we go. Just a fabulous game. A big crowd, 9,284 at Segra Park, which is the minor league park for the Columbia Fireflies in Columbia, South Carolina. But even though it was in Columbia, it was mostly Gamecock fans, but it was pretty solidly a pretty solid Clemson crowd as well, which is to be expected. I'm sure that, lots of Clemson fans and alums live in Columbia, right? Or are willing to make the drive, and so pretty good crowd in general. They announced it as the biggest crowd in this rivalry, basically non-Omaha edition. So heck of a crowd there. Not a lot of them left. This game went 12. It stretched close to 4 hours. It was a 4 o'clock start, so it's not like it was getting to be late at night necessarily. But you know how it goes, especially if you've got little ones. Hanging around a ballpark for 4 hours is not exactly something that's going to hold their attention. So, but it didn't seem like a lot of folks left, and they were treated to a wonderful game. Clemson jumped out to an early lead here. South Carolina got one back, but the big blow for South Carolina was in the ninth. They finally came around offensively and got a 2-run home run, pinch hit RBI triple for Blake Jackson first on a misplay in right field for Clemson's Alden Mathis. He had a beat on the ball. It just kind of floated over his glove up against the wall. So Blake Jackson RBI triple, and then Ethan Petrie a 2-run home run in the ninth to tie the game 4-4, and kind of set the stage for the final few innings. Ultimately, a walk-off home run for Andrew Chufo, a Georgetown transfer for Clemson. Not the most physical guy in the Clemson lineup, but he really got into a pitch from Garrett Gainey and rode the ball out of the park to walk it off. The first time Clemson has hit a walk-off home run against South Carolina in the rivalry's history. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit when you consider how long those two teams have played each other. So if you're South Carolina, there was some good and bad here. I think the offense felt stuck in neutral. The offense has been pretty decent this year, especially when you consider that Cole Messina's off to a little bit of a cool start. Parker Noland is not swinging the bat particularly well. Gavin Casas is not swinging the bat particularly well. So considering those things, guys you were expecting to be right in the middle of this thing, the offense has actually performed pretty well. But it did feel kind of stuck in neutral Saturday. It felt like they were kind of waiting around for someone like Petrie to do what Petrie did ultimately in the ninth inning and hit a 2-run bomb and kind of bail them out. It felt very just stand at the plate and swing. And this is never going to be a program or a team that's going to do a lot of hit and run and running, bunting. This is not Kentucky. Like, it's going to be different. However, like, you do have to put the ball in play. You have to, it feels like you just have to have some momentum offensively. And look, the pitching for Clemson was good. Tristan Smith threw the ball really well. Ethan Darden threw the ball really well after him. And that's just before we got into extra innings. But it was a lot of strikeouts for South Carolina. It felt like. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out as the season goes on, because on paper, this is a very good lineup. How much they're able to reach that ceiling remains to be seen. I've seen South Carolina lineups in recent years that looked great on paper that the reality wasn't as good as what it looked on paper, in large part because it was an offense that, would go strikeout, solo home run. And then that's kind of what you were trying to live off of. And that's just a tough way to live. You have to be able to hit the long ball in the SEC. I'm on record as saying that offenses that can't get bailed out by a 3-run home run are going to have a tough time in the SEC. So you love the power, but the consistency has to be there. And we'll see. I'm not waving up hitting a panic button, certainly with South Carolina offense, but it was interesting to me. This is the first time I'd seen South Carolina in person this season, obviously. And I was expecting one thing offensively and got quite another. And perhaps it was just the good Clemson pitching. What you really liked, though, is that Garrett Gainey looked like fundamentally a different pitcher than I've seen. I've seen him pitch a decent bit. I saw him at Liberty. I did the Liberty fall report a couple of years ago, so I saw him in a fall scrimmage. I've seen him during the regular season, and he was a good arm, but the numbers, if you go back and look at his Liberty career, the numbers were never very good. And I was kind of surprised that South Carolina took him in the transfer portal. It just seemed like the type of guy that, if his numbers are what they are at Liberty, and he pitched at Winthrop before that, in state school in South Carolina. And how is that going to translate to South Carolina? And we're not an SEC play yet, but Clemson is, obviously an SEC caliber program that's on that level. And he was awesome. I mean, the fastball was 92, 94. He touched a 95 early in his outing. And it's one of those fastballs that just, reminds me of Jaden Jaden Woods last year at Georgia, his fastball, where the ball just like has that induced vertical break where it just feels like it's rising on a hitter. So what you end up with are a lot of swings at fastballs that the batter feels like are kind of like sternum high, but they end up neck high. And so you end up with a lot of swing and miss up in the zone on the fastball. And that's a lot of what it was. And man, this an emotional pitcher, no doubt. I was surprised I mean, he only threw 40 pitches in 3 2/3. So, I mean, clearly he wasn't being taxed too much, but with the emotion that he was pouring into every single pitch, you just wondered if he was going to be just gassed by the end of it. But he threw the ball well up until that one pitch to Andrew Chufo, really. And Jimmy Obertop hit the ball hard right before Chufo and kind of made you wonder, okay, are they figuring him out? And Chufo, lo and behold, the next batter hits a home run. But I do think they found something in Gainey. He's definitely a character. Like after strikeouts, he was doing a lot of fist pumping and flexing. And at one point, he like underlined the Carolina on his chest, towards his own dugout. There was another time where he skipped around the mound after a strikeout. Like he's a character, and that's going to make opposing offenses are going to want to score on him because that's going to be irritating to other teams. But it's if you're a Carolina fan, you like he has that kind of swagger out there. So I think that was a big positive though, because that's the type of thing that Carolina is looking for when you had the questions that they had on the mound. Okay, so let's move on to player of the day, pitcher of the day, because I went a little bit long there. Player of the day candidates here: Calvin Hewitt, 3 for 4 for Vanderbilt. Matthew Polk went 2 for 3 with a double and a home run. I mentioned those guys because they were both at the bottom of the Vanderbilt order. Getting production at the bottom of the order, that's huge for a team like Vanderbilt that kind of has to lean on its depth in the lineup more so than necessarily star power in the middle of the order. Emilian Petre for Kentucky, 3 for 4 with 2 doubles, 4 runs batted in. Cooper Weiss in game 1 of the doubleheader against UConn, 2 for 3 with a home run, 3 runs batted in, and 2 stolen bases. A couple of Missouri guys, because anytime your team scores 28 runs, you're going to have guys who have good offensive days. Justin Colon, 4 for 5, 5 runs batted in. Jackson Beeman, 3 for 3 with a double, a home run, and 7 RBIs. And Blake Burke for Tennessee, 3 for 4 with 2 home runs. But the player of the day for me is Andrew Fisher from Ole Miss, 3 for 5 with 2 home runs and 5 runs batted in. The combination of those numbers plus the spot, because Ole Miss would have been a tough scene if they'd have lost this series to Iowa. So they lived to fight another day to win this series on Sunday, and Fisher was right in the middle of it offensively in a 12-run output for Ole Miss. It's going to be a big rubber game for the Rebels on Sunday because, again, you lose that series to Iowa, which is a good club. Like, there's really no shame necessarily in and of itself in a series loss to Iowa, but it wouldn't, it would not do much to create confidence that Ole Miss is going to have more success in the SEC than they did last season. So looking for a big series win for Ole Miss today. Pitcher of the day, a lot of good candidates too, like a lot of really good starting pitching efforts yesterday around the league. Bryce Cunningham, 5 2/3, 1 run allowed against Houston at Minute Maid Park. Cal Steven, granted it's Mount St. Mary's, but kind of got back on the horse and looked like the Cal Steven we saw opening weekend as opposed to the one that got beat up last weekend. 6 shutout innings there. Dom Nyman for Kentucky against Lipscomb, 6 innings pitched, 1 run. Chase Alsop, let me skip Alsop. Hang on. Tigert, 5 innings pitched, 1 run. 10 strikeouts for Brady Tigert against Murray State. Jurangelo Senja for Mississippi State. So 2 good starts for Mississippi State yesterday against Mount St. Mary's, 6 2/3, no runs. And then Drew Beam, 6 innings pitched, 1 run allowed against Bowling Green. I skipped Alsop because he is actually the pitcher of the day against UConn in game 1 of the doubleheader there. 6 innings pitched, 6 hits, 1 run, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. And I went with him because you could have made an argument for Gage Jump too, just considering what Gage Jump means to it. And Carl Dunn on YouTube with a comment there: LSU starting pitching is fire so far, and could not agree more. LSU in a really good place with its starting pitching. Feels like it has more options than it has spots in the rotation right now, which is a good problem to have, especially when you consider last year that after Skeens there were some some juggling and some questions about the starting rotation. But I chose Alsop just because of what first of all, it's a good opponent. UConn's a good team. Off to a slow start, but that tends to be the way UConn goes. Slow start early in the season when they're first getting outside, because they've spent the January in Connecticut. They get better as the season goes on, but that's a good team. So it's that. And then also, this is the Chase Alsop that Auburn needs to be the best version of itself. And I think we saw some of the risk in game 2 of the doubleheader when UConn really jumped on Joseph Gonzalez. It wasn't a good start for Joseph Gonzalez after he looked pretty good last weekend. So if there's going to be some volatility there, they're really going to need Alsop to be at least solid and be in the strike zone and all of that. And he was Saturday against UConn. So he gets the pitcher of the day, just not only for the stats, but also for what he means for this Auburn rotation and being able to give them that kind of performance. Sunday's game of the day, I'm looking at Alabama versus Dallas Baptist. On its face, that's a good game already. DBU, a ranked team, Alabama obviously ranked in the top 20. But what takes it to the next level for me is a good there's a funny question on YouTube. I'll get to it in a second. Very good question. I've now lost my train of thought. You know what? I'll get to it now. Armstrong Grappling on YouTube. Serious question. Would you rather get punched in the face once by Jared Jones or 5 times by Stephen Milam? And this is a fabulous question. Jared Jones, obviously, for those who maybe don't know, big physical guy. The one punch might knock you out. Stephen Milam, smaller guy, middle infielder, the comparisons to Alex Bregman are like too easy to make. He's from New Mexico. He plays middle infield. Like he's short, and this comes from a short person. Like I am also short. That's, because Stephen Milam is probably stronger than he looks just because he's short, right? But he's an athlete. So I would go once by Jared Jones and just pray it didn't knock me out. But if you give Stephen Milam, really anybody, 5 swings at you, that's going to go really poorly for you. Like if we're assuming they're just getting open shots on me, yeah, I think I'm going to go. He's called Monster. That's true. I have heard that, Monster Milam. Yeah, I'm going to take the Jared Jones. It would be a very painful punch. Like I'm not saying that it was the better of the options. They both would be awful, but I'm just going to hope he doesn't knock me out in one punch. Whereas with Milam, yeah, if he gets 5 open swings at me, like that's going to do some serious damage. So great question there. Let's have more of those questions on these shows because I'm here for it. Back to Alabama DBU. Alabama offensively has looked really good this season. That was kind of a question, frankly, and we can point to opposition and stuff. We can do that with the entire SEC. Everyone's had a weekend or two where the opposition's not been good, but they really are swinging the bat really well. The newcomers have really led the way for them, which is exactly what they needed because there wasn't a ton coming back, at least in terms of middle of the order bats. So they've gotten these newcomers on board pretty quickly. But today presents a specific challenge. James Ellwanger is going to be on the mound for DBU, and this guy throws gas. He's a freshman, so maybe you can rattle him. Maybe it's just not his day, but he is going to come at you with about 100 miles an hour. And so, you kind of know what you're going to get. It's going to be very much a here it comes, can you hit it or not kind of deal for them. So I'm intrigued to see how that goes because it's just a different look, and that's something. And Alabama's going to see velocity like that in the SEC. So it's a good test for the Crimson Tide. But how effective will their offense be against a good young arm like that? I'm certainly looking forward to it. But there's lots of great games in the SEC on Sunday, plenty to watch, whether it's your team or if you're just checking in on the rest of the league. Some quick plugs as I get out of here, and thank you guys for joining me again on Sunday. We'll do this again Friday morning as we get ready for the next weekend. So if you're just finding this, I'll be doing this every weekend morning. The idea is, especially once we get into SEC play, Mark and I will do this together sometimes. I'd like to have some other guests. It won't be quite so much solo Joe time on these things, but to this point it has been. So mostly just scheduling reasons. But okay. Yes, Carl, LSU versus Texas State. Mind you, Texas State 2-0 in that tournament. So like wins over Houston and Texas, like they're going to come to play for sure. So LSU's going to have to play well to win that game. That's a good call, Carl. Plugs on my way out. I wrote about Clemson, South Carolina. I know as a Carolina fan, folks might not necessarily want to relive that, but it is a fun story about Andrew Chufo and his day, because not only did he hit the walk-off home run, he played excellent defense at shortstop and saved at least one run from scoring in that game. So really impacted the game that way. Kendall Rogers is in Houston, so if you're a Vanderbilt fan and LSU fan, check out what he wrote about his day in Houston. Aaron is in Frisco, so he's got more on Alabama's win yesterday over Arizona. And those two will be back in place again today in Houston and Frisco to write about those teams again. I will be I just realized I've had my screen share on the whole time. You should looking at that box score for a long time. I will, of course, be in Clemson for game 2. It's the finale, but game 2 of the rivalry series between Clemson and South Carolina. So looking forward to that and seeing it in a home environment after yesterday was theoretically a neutral site game. That's going to do it as we stretch to 20 minutes here, the longest one of these I've done, but it's been great. Good conversation in the comments. I appreciate you guys. I'll be back Friday morning with the next Weekend Waypoints. Enjoy the Sunday of baseball, everyone.